Hello good people, I'm Dmitry. CES, man, it's always quite a challenge coming to a suite with makeshift lighting. I make sure not to stand over here because I get blown out, but we also get a nice little challenge to explore different products and show them to you in best light possible. So in front of me is the Lian Li O11 Dynamic Mini, a new enclosure from Lian Li that is taking the footsteps of the original really popular O11 Dynamic and the slightly larger version, the O11 Dynamic XL, miniaturizing things and trying to be also a bit different, not trying to go and just release a tiny smaller version of the original O11 Dynamic, and that is exactly what they did with a few cool features. As usual, big thanks to our sponsors, Razer, Phanteks, Thermaltake, and Be Quiet for making CES possible. So let's begin with a few exterior changes. No longer do we have the brushed aluminum little section over here. Now it is temper glass and it is blacked out to match the glass over here. I do like this approach. The top panel now also has a different ventilation pattern. No longer do we have the strips. It is now more square. We've seen similar things from NZXT and Razer. I love this thing. It's also slightly different. The one thing I am unsure about is this square over here. It is a screen. It cycles between the Lian Li and the Bowers logo because they forgot to put a logo on the case. I'm not a fan of it. You can turn it off, of course, but let us know what you think of this design. The I/O has shifted to the bottom of the case, nicely accessible with dual USB 3s, a Type-C. We have an audio jack as well, and the front of the case no longer goes all the way to the bottom, giving you access to actually lift the case, which I appreciate. The power and reset buttons have been relocated to the top. Now they're recessed in this little chrome section that is going to be a dust magnet. But check this out. So you remove the top panel like you would normally do on the O11 Dynamic. It slides right back out, and you have this secondary plate that you need to slide inwards in order to access the rear panel. So this is something that they definitely have to make sure that users are aware of how to do. So the O11 Dynamic Mini is of course a much smaller enclosure versus the original O11 Dynamic, 37 liters versus 52. Yet it still supports ATX motherboards, which is quite impressive. So if you're after the whole O11 Dynamic look but want something slightly smaller, you can still go with an ATX motherboard inside. That does limit your radiator compatibility for the top and the bottom. Not recommended to go with a radiator if you have an ATX motherboard in there, but aside, 240 rad is not an issue, which is pretty awesome. The most significant change on the interior is the modularity of the backplate, allowing you to install an ATX motherboard in there, but that does limit your radiator compatibility for the bottom and the top. However, you can still mount a 240 rad on the side with an ATX setup, not a problem. You do have to install an additional side bracket when you go with a micro ATX on the ATX motherboard, but if you go with an ITX motherboard, you can shift that entire thing down, losing a few PCI slots, but gaining so much extra height above for radiator clearance. So if you do have an ITX motherboard, you can install a 280 at the bottom, a 280 at the top, and 280 on the side. So having lots of radiator options when you go with the smaller motherboard. All right, so the second chamber has now been made much smaller, and that is because they wanted to keep the chassis not too wide. SFX power supply, or SFX-L. We have dual hard drive cages that you remove from the back, and this whole section over here is dedicated for cooling. So you can mount dual 140s or dual 120mm fans outside of the frame. The same thing with the radiator if you go with a 240 rad out there. Plenty of space for cable management if you remove the hard drive cage, and I'm sure you can like route things cleanly regardless, because this whole area is open. And this allows the O11 Dynamic Mini to actually remain mini and not to be too wide while still accommodating a pretty beefy system. And SFX and SFX-L power supplies are becoming more abundant and more high wattage, so this should not be a huge limitation. All right guys, so that is the O11 Dynamic Mini. Really liking what Lian Li is doing in terms of miniaturizing the enclosure, making sure that it's still a lot different versus the O11 Dynamic and the XL versions. Really liking the dual paneling approach for the top. Do not like the screen, love the new ventilation pattern, love the ATX, micro ATX, and ITX form factors compatibility. Now the price point, check this out, $89 to $99, still undecided. What do you guys think about it? And now I hear that there's some interesting fans coming from Lian Li. Michael, take it away.
So now that Dmitry is done with the cases, I'm gonna say, Dmitry, enjoy editing this vertical video. All right, guys, with that out of the way, we are at our last meeting, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on really quickly too. First of all, it's the second gen strimmer cable, and this is going to be sold actually at the same time as the original one. It has 10 times the number of LEDs as the first gen, and it's also made out of silicon, so it's a lot more pliable and it can fit into more constrained areas. That's a really awesome move by Lian Li, basically because technology is just changing so quickly and they're actually able to move with that technology. And speaking of technology, there's something else I wanted to touch on. And it's not the most interesting thing on the face of the planet. These are the Unifan. We first saw these at Computex last year, and now they've been refined to the point where they can be completely unified together. And what do I mean by unified? What they have done is created a really intuitive connector system. So all you have to do is start with one little tab, and that tab slots directly into the fan. It turns on the fan, it turns on the RGBs, and then you can add additional fans to that. Right now, they're going to be sold in 3 packs. So a 3-pack is either going to be $60 or $70, and that 3-pack can be dynamically added one right on top of each other. So come in here a little bit closer and let's check this out. What I'm going to do without slicing off my fingers is quickly put these fans together. So let's go for the first one, and there's a little tab inside of here and on the other fan that will slot one inside of the other, and all of the information from one to another is taken over this 6-pole connector. You just pop one directly into another and you close it up. The next one goes in and you close it up. And this can be moved around, and not only that, is if you have oddly shaped or positioned mounting holes, you're just able to pop maybe 2 or 4 screws into this whole 3-fan design and just pop it into wherever you want in your case. You can see they all flow well together. So guys, that's it from Lian Li. It's been the end of a pretty long day. I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Let us know what you think about everything that you've seen here, and we will all see you in the next one.